Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayana IAS. This is a part of Daily News Analysis in which we select certain articles from the Hindu as well as Indian Express and do a detailed discussions on those topics. The topics that have been selected are as follows. Firstly, small poll, large lesson. It is from the Indian Express page number 12. It discusses about the recent mayoral elections dispute that has led to Supreme Court's direction to cancel the way in which it was conducted. Next one, changing the growth paradigm. It is from the Hindu page number 8. This deals with the way in which economic growth is supposed to be organized in a country so that it caters to the needs to various sections of the society. Next one, ISRO Papa detects solar wind impact of coronal mass ejection. It is from the Hindu page number 6. It is with regards to the recent findings of the Papa payload, which is one of the payload of the Aditya mission. This has detected electrons as well as ions, thus enables us to understand the sun's corona. Next one, Center amends surrogacy rules, allows couples to use donor gametes. It is from the Hindu page number 12. This is with regards to the recent changes in regulating surrogacy in the country. This will enable now the donor gametes to be used in surrogacy as well, which were earlier prohibited. Next one, the NB8 visit to India focuses on cooperation and trust. It is from the Hindu page number 8. This deals with the NB8 grouping relations with India and their attendance to Raisinia dialogue. In addition to it, at the last, we are going to deal the preliminary and mains practice questions on the topics that we have discussed above. So please stay tuned till the end. Now let us look into the first article. Embark on your UPSC journey with Narayana IAS Academy. Our esteemed 5-year and 3-year integrated programs now open for admission in Hyderabad, Vijayawada and Nellore. Our courses includes robust R&D backed initiative such as Daily News Analysis, Daily News Review, which is a comprehensive review program for a broader understanding of current affairs. NCERT program, a foundational course that covers all NCERT syllabi, crucial for UPSC preparation. Mentorship program for personalized guidance and regular test series for systematic learning and assessment. So begin your journey to becoming a leader with Narayana IAS Academy today. This article is on the Chandigarh mayor poll. As you have seen, the Supreme Court intervention on the final results of the election of mayor in Chandigarh, this article is important. This article deals with the Supreme Court's power under Article 142. We'll see what the Article 142 deals with and how it empowers Supreme Court and how in the past Supreme Court has used this power to undo the injustices created in the society on account of the lacunae among the legislature or parliament, that is parliament, or the central government's executive, that is the executive at the central level. One could also go to the Supreme Court to tackle the injustices caused by the state governments with the power of Article 142 that has empowered Supreme Court. Now let us look into the topics that you are going to learn under this Article 142 and separation of powers. Because here, using Article 142, Supreme Court could undo the steps taken by the Parliament or the central government, or for that matter, even the state government. Under the UPSC syllabus, structure, organization, and function of the judiciary. Coming to the previous year question, critically examine the Supreme Court's judgment on National Judicial Appointments Commission Act 2014 with reference to appointment of judges of higher judiciary in India. This question has been seen in the year 2017 UPSC examination. Similarly, you could expect question on the usage of Article 142 power of the Supreme Court. Coming to the context, we have seen the usage of Article 142, that is invoking Article 142. Supreme Court has undone the steps taken by the executive in deciding the Chandigarh mayoral election. there is a presiding officer who is supposed to count the votes has done injustice, has not followed the due process that is supposed to be followed, and thus, as a way, has committed injustices, has violated the democratic credentials of this country. This has led to the mistrust among the people. Why? Because the people have elected the corporators. Instead of deciding the final result on the basis of the total tally in terms of votes, what we have seen instead is the biasness showed by the presiding officer, who is supposed to be objective. Instead, he has invalidated 8 votes to get one party to power. Else, the election result would have been entirely different. Thus, the misuse of power by the presiding officer ultimately led to the change in the result of the elections. This should not have been happened. Think about the case where the results are decided at the state level or at the central level. It is decided on the basis of the number of elected candidates of that particular party. If the political party is able to form government, it means that it has majority in the House. Or if the alliance has the majority, then it forms the government. But in this case, despite having less number of candidates being elected in terms of forming the local body government, what we have seen is the complete disregard to the procedure, in a way overturning the mandate given by the people. This is harmful to the democracy, and thus this raises the questions regarding the way in which the third-tier governments are formed or third-tier elections are being held in the entire country. So, as a matter of this, why Supreme Court has intervened? Firstly, upholding the electoral sanctity, as we have already seen, because there was invalidation of the 8 votes. This conduct by the presiding officer is unacceptable. This irregularities in elections is ultimately struck down by the Supreme Court under Article 142. And as per the basic structure, this is injustice, and thus is liable to be struck down by the Supreme Court. We have a case called Kito Olohan versus Zachulu case, in which Supreme Court has proclaimed that democracy is a part of the basic structure. So, if the basic structure is violated, it is liable to be struck down. Thus, the incorrect declaration was overturned, and now the final count is also going to be decided again. Now, looking into what Article 142 is. Article 142 empowers Supreme Court to intervene so that it could do the complete justice. Why there is a need for an intervention of the Supreme Court? Why? Because sometimes we cannot expect, or sometimes we see the deviation of the expected standards, deviation from the expected standards by the executive or by the legislature. And this leads to violation of the law or undermines the individual's fundamental rights, or even with regards to dereliction of duty, when a duty is to be upheld or when a duty is to be conducted by the executive, but yet it is not conducted. Even in that case, to do the complete justice, to ensure that there is complete justice, the judiciary has been provided this power under Article 142. And whatever the decision that the Supreme Court takes under Article 142 is binding. It has a binding effect. Thus, the executive or legislature doesn't have the power to overturn the directions given by the Supreme Court under Article 142. You can imagine the extent of power that resides in the judiciary on account of this one particular article. Thus, no wing, either the legislature or executive, has the power to violate the laws of the land or to do injustice for one or the other reason. In addition to Article 142, we have other articles in the constitutions which aid Supreme Court to strictly enforce Article 142's power. These are as follows. Firstly, Article 32, under which there are various prerogative writs. These writs are nothing but written order. That is, Supreme Court uses these writs to enforce fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are nothing but the claims of the citizens against the executive, against the state. And within the state, we have executive, legislature, and so on. Because whatever the decisions that are taken by the state have the impact of binding upon these individuals, and certain times these decisions are unjust, are violative of the individual rights. For example, restrictions on the freedom of speech and expression, that is, press restrictions. This ultimately impacts the individual. And thus, individual could seek the intervention of the Supreme Court to tackle this injustice caused on account of the decisions taken by the executive or the legislature, for that matter. It might be parliament, it might be state legislature. So, Supreme Court has been given such power. Even the High Court has been given this power under Article 32. Similarly, we have Article 141, under which Supreme Court's decision is binding on all the courts. So, whatever the decisions that the Supreme Court takes, it is binding on all the high courts as well as all the lower courts, that subordinate courts. Under Article 136, Supreme Court has been granted the power to review whatever the decisions that are taken by any court or tribunal. Because we have various tribunals in the country, like Central Administrative Tribunal. Similarly, we have tribunals which deals with the finances or other matter. For example, telecom regulation. So whatever the decisions that are taken, they should try to abide by the spirit of the Constitution, abide by the basic structure of the Constitution. The usage of Article 142 has been shown in various cases that the Supreme Court has dealt in the past. For example, in the Union Carbide Corporation versus Union of India case, in 1991, Supreme Court has directed to pay the Bhopal gas tragedy victims, thus compensating them. So, in here you could see Supreme Court has done complete justice, has tried to ensure that there is justice. Here the executive has failed to hear the voices of the people who have been victimized on account of this particular tragedy, who have lost their loved ones, who have lost properties on account of it. They are supposed to be compensated. It is the responsibility of the executive, because we have various laws to take care of the needs. Yet it hasn't been taken care of. Similarly, Supreme Court Bar Association versus Union of India case in the year 1998, Supreme Court has stressed that Article 142's power are supplementary. That is, they supplement other powers. You could seek assistance from the Supreme Court, but not strictly under Article 142, because Article 142 provides sweeping powers to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has said that it has to be used rarely. Supreme Court has, in the case Jubilee Hills Cooperative House Building Society versus Jidarnath, has clarified the importance that the Article 142 intent is to ensure that there is no injustice in the society. And it has defined what the complete justice is in the case State of Karnataka versus Uma Devi in the year 2006. And even in this case, it has reiterated the need for using Article 142 sparingly. Given the extent of caution that the Supreme Court shows in terms of using Article 142, there is a need to understand how it impacts the power balance within our country if Supreme Court oversteps its jurisdiction. Of course, Article 142 has clearly shown us that there is no strict jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. Despite having three wings which deals with the power of the state, might be legislature, executive, judiciary, each having their own spheres within which they are supposed to be operate. The spheres, so-called spheres, we call it as jurisdiction. The intervention of the judiciary is expected only if there is injustice in the country, that is to intervene when it is supposed to adjudicate the matter to see that whoever the victim is, they are supposed to get justice, and in that case, judiciary intervenes. But in this case, the judiciary has the power to step into the jurisdiction of executive as well as legislature. We have the strict separation of powers, not strict in India's case. There is separation of powers for thoroughly conducting the matters or affairs of the state. And we have constitutional provisions that deal with this separation of power. But Article 142 has shown that Supreme Court has no jurisdiction when it wants to intervene so that it could deliver complete justice. But this is not without any problem. There are certain problems with regards to the way in which Supreme Court could use Article 142 powers. The problems are encroachment on separation of powers. We elect representatives to represent our interests in the legislature. At the same time, to form the government, that is executive. And these are expected to show their wisdom or use their wisdom in realizing the interests of the nation. But instead, Supreme Court or judiciary doesn't have the mandate of the people. Of course, people trust judiciary, but people doesn't trust judiciary with regards to formation of the government. Formation of the government is through elections, proper election channels. And thus, it violates thorough separation of power. In a way, if Supreme Court uses its power, it is undermining the power that the people have who use their vote power ultimately to get the candidates elected in the elections. And the judiciary lacks the special knowledge that is required to take decisions. For example, in giving the clearance to the environmental projects, Supreme Court certain times steps in and revokes the decision taken by the executive. Even in those cases, it lacks the special knowledge that is required. Whereas the government has various bureaucrats, bodies that has special knowledge. Through that, the government could take a stance, could take a decision. And government also knows the true reality that is happening at the ground. Government is formed through the elected representatives, so it knows the ground reality, and on that basis, it takes a decision. Thus, there might be a possibility of error in terms of the decisions taken by the judiciary when it misuses or when it uses the power but undermines the power of executive or legislature. Next, it strains the judicial system. The judicial system is already struck with many cases that are yet to be resolved. Around 80,000 cases of the Supreme Court are still pending as of now. Added to it, if Supreme Court intervenes in the tasks that are supposed to be taken by legislature or executive, it further increases the number of pending cases. This ultimately impacts the ability to take decisions by the Supreme Court, and thus the justice will be delayed. So we know the justice delayed is justice denied. Similarly, it is an erosion of the executive authority. Because here the authority of the executive is undermined, as we have seen through various examples. Of course, Subhash Kashyap has said that Supreme Court or the judiciary for that matter oversteps its jurisdiction when it is truly necessary. It doesn't intervene again and again. Supreme Court actually uses the Article 142 sparingly. We have left it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court itself to decide on that matter when and where it seems fit to use the power that is vested within the hands of the Supreme Court. And ultimately, we expect the justice to be delivered by the Supreme Court. You could also ask similar questions on the executive as well as legislature for their delayed decision making, for causing troubles in the society on account of the unjust decisions taken by them without considering the interests of all the sections of the society, for being biased on certain matters to uphold their own power rather than uphold the principles in the manner in which the government is supposed to run. And thus, on those cases, we expect the judiciary intervention. And we could also explain similarly that through these interventions, we could actually maintain a delicate balance of power. And thus, we could see that the interests of all the sections are represented either through legislature, executive, and in some cases even the judiciary, where judiciary intervenes. This completes the article. Now, let us look into another article. This article is on the need for changing the growth paradigm. Every country strives to increase the prosperity. That is, it wants to become richer so that it could provide the goods and services that are required to meet the needs of the people. But again and again, what we are seeing in all the countries is the rising inequalities. Concomitantly, that is ultimately impacting the quality of life of the people who are in the below poverty line section, whose incomes are at the lower ranks. Thus, we need to see that the growth is distributive so that even the lower class people or the people who have incomes at the lower levels could also benefit from the fruits of the growth, that is economic growth. In this article, we are going to learn about the ways we could achieve this possibility, that is attaining a sustainable growth rate so that even the lower class people could experience the richness, experience the prosperity and meet their needs rather than being vulnerable to the vagaries of the market. The topics that we are going to learn from this article are the economic growth and economic development. There is a distinction between growth and development. Economic growth is quantitative in terms of magnitude. For example, India is a $4 trillion economy, but it doesn't mean that every Indian experiences or every Indian is able to earn similarly. There are inequalities. Thus, we try to also calculate the developmental levels in terms of the attainment of individuals in the society, in terms of their quality of life, their educational attainments, their health levels, their nutritional levels, etc. So we need to try to improve the growth as well as development so that a country thrives. With regards to syllabus, it is from the GS paper 3, growth and development. Coming to the previous year question, it is argued that the strategy of inclusive growth is intended to meet the objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. So, the strategy of inclusive growth is to promote the growth which is distributive, which is inclusive, which is trying to cater to the needs of every sections of the society. It might be tribals, it might be the scheduled castes, it might be the tribals, it might be the tribals, it might be the scheduled castes, it might be the other backward castes, it might be different religious backgrounds, it might be different classes, lower class or upper class, middle class. So if everyone is able to experience, then we call it as inclusive. That is, the growth is not exclusive, catering to only fewer sections of the society. Comment on the statement. So this is about the question that has been asked. Similarly, could I expect the question with regards to the increasing inequalities and its impact ultimately upon the lower sections? The context is the paradigm of more GDP that we are presently focusing is not doing justice, is actually being exclusive, is actually being unequal because of the inequality that we are witnessing in the society. So we have to change the way in which we are trying to attain higher growth rates. We need to see that there is development as well. So the background of the story is, after the liberalization, that is opening up our economy to private investors as well as the global investors, India clocked higher growth rates. We have liberalized our economy starting from the 1991. It doesn't mean that we have started taking steps in the year 1991 itself. As actually the foundations of it lies in the 1980s during the Rajiv Gandhi era, as well as the Indira Gandhi during the 1980 to 84. Then later it was carried forward by Rajiv Gandhi. But actual steps have been taken of 1991 due to the requirements of the Indian economy to meet its needs, having low forest reserves. Of course, we are not going to go into the details of it, but that is the background of the Indian economy. Later on, what we have witnessed is high prosperity. For example, we grew at 7.2% per year starting from the last 20 years. And only in few occasions we have seen lower growth rates. For example, in the year 2008-9 due to the financial crisis, and 2020 to 2021 on account of the COVID crisis. Only there are rare occasions where India was not able to click higher growth rates. Sometimes we have clocked even the 10% growth rate mark as well. But the tragedy is the structural conditions that led to unequal growth rate, inequitable growth, that is, growth not being distributive, are still laying strong. We need to undermine this structure, which ultimately is doing injustice to various sections of the society. If you look at the graphs, the income inequality, red indicates India. There is a rise in Indian income inequalities in India. Similarly, if you look at the share of national income of the top 1%, starting from the year 1980 to 2021, you could see how India is witnessing higher growth rates at the top ranked section, that is top 1%, when compared to other countries like China, United States, United Kingdom for that matter. Of course, in terms of wealth inequality, we have seen France to be the highest. Of course, in terms of income inequality, we see France to be of highest, but Indians are also witnessing the similar structural tragedy. Coming to the wealth inequality, we see the France again showing outpacing everyone, whereas India is not far behind. India still has high wealth inequality. All this indicates that there is a need to change the pattern. What is the established pattern of economic growth rates followed in various countries? Of course, we have inherited from the Western countries how to increase the prosperity. Western countries are witnessing higher income inequality. Similarly, we too are witnessing the higher income inequality. Let us look into the growth patterns that we have adopted and that is leading to the inequality in the country. We follow the similar stages. Initially, we invest in agriculture, then we strive for industrialization, then we move to the services. This is a regular growth pattern followed by all the countries in the world. Similarly, India is following this pattern. Of course, India is an exception. We are set to jump directly from agriculture to services. Of course, industries have been concentrated, but their contribution to the Indian economy in terms of GDP is lower when compared to other countries when we try to calculate the transition phases. And similarly, in India, we have moved from rural to urban. Of course, we are still in the process of transformation. Of course, the urban growth rate is rising day by day. This is a one-size-fits-all approach. We have adopted the similar model, which have been proven to increase the income of the country, that is, prosperity of the country. But this is actually leading to inequality, as we have already seen in the. One more thing with this pattern of growth is the excess or extent of energy that we are witnessing or that we are using. The energy usage in attaining this growth rate is higher. Year by year, India is also consuming more and more fuel. We have seen on account of this that environmental damage that we are causing. We are not only using the fossil fuels, we are also clearing the forest for establishing industries or increasing the habitat or transforming it to an agricultural land that ultimately is impacting the environmental health. Thus, the growth is impacting the environmental health. So this pattern or this form of growth that we have adopted from the Western countries and we adapted to it to Indian conditions, yet we are witnessing environmental sustainability as well as economically explosive growth rate. This needs to be changed. We have a Niti Aayog strategy to overturn this, to see that the growth could be distributive. This is a sustainable growth model given by the Niti Aayog. Firstly, the market economy. Of course, market economy has the ability to generate a lot of prosperity in the country. What is market economy? that is opening up our economy to Indians as well as global investors, to see that there is investment in industry, service sector, etc. This generates motivation. The competition itself is a motivator. The individuals who use their entrepreneurial skills, their ability to mobilize finances, their ability to capture the market, their ability to create the market, that ultimately leads to employment generation, etc., and thus prosperity. So firstly, we need to promote market competition that we are witnessing. Of course, we are still not as open as US do. We are on the process of doing it. We have adopted ease of doing business strategy to attain this growth. Similarly, the public good provision by the government, where the competitive model doesn't work. For example, primary education. We cannot expect every family to afford primary education in the country. For that purpose, there is a need for stepping up government investment. And we have the need for capital investment, human capital in terms of jobs, in terms of skills, in terms of technology, know-how, etc., knowledge, efficiency, and productivity. All these are important to fast-track the growth. Especially we are living in a knowledge era. Knowledge economy is the one which is driving the growth rate in the country. And then promotion of entrepreneurship, so that every individual who tries to lay foundation for the business is to be given the opportunity to lay a foundation. So this is a model, it's a market model. But we have seen this market model to be unsustainable, to be unequal. That is why we have the inclusive growth models, the empowerment approach, in which we try to empower the sections which need some assistance, which need some hand-holding from the government. This hand-holding is the Antyodaya empowerment approach. This is followed by India, but it needs to be stepped up. This is Bharati approach towards social welfare in a multifaceted manner. We provide subsidies, direct transfers to recipients. For example, direct transfers that we provide to the farmers of this country. Similarly, we have indirect subsidies to reduce the cost of the goods and services. For example, the fertilizers, the food subsidies. Or we provide scholarships. Thus, we try to meet the basic needs of the population. And thus, we try to improve the quality of life of the lower sections of the society. Ultimately, the pragmatism approach, we have to balance both. We cannot expect the government to step in all the time and take care of the needs of the people. Certain times it has to find other ways. Certain times it has to find a way to improve the earning capabilities of the lower sections of the society. As the lower sections need hand-holding, at the same time, we need to build their capacities. At the same time, the government's intervention costs money. Government takes debt to fuel its expenditure, to incur expenses. But this debt should be sustainable. We cannot expect unproductive expenditures committed by the governments, the so-called dole-outs, the so-called freebies. So it has to try to balance both. And we have to borrow for investment so that our investments have the ability to pay for the borrowed money, at the same time generate more revenue. This is a profitable model, sustainable model. We could again fund expenditure through the investments carried out by the government by borrowing from the market. For example, building infrastructure, road connectivity, electricity connections, etc. And we have to see that the monetarist obsession with regards to targeting of inflation should be balanced with the growth rate promotion. Again and again, we see that the interest rates are risen by the central bank when there is higher inflation. That is when there is rise in prices. We try to control the flow of money. We try to raise interest rates. But this has to be balanced with the growth rate, that is economic growth rate. Because most of the time, the reason for the rise in inflation in our country is on account of the imports of goods like fossil fuels, or due to the vagaries of monsoons or agricultural structural issues that ultimately leads to fluctuations in the prices of the agricultural goods. For that matter, we need to balance between inflation and the growth rate. This balance ultimately enables us to have sustainable growth rate. At the same time, maintain fiscal health, that is, keeping the borrowings within the limit that we set unto ourselves to see that our loans do not get out of hand and we fall in debt. So in this way, you need to be pragmatic. You need to be inclusive in terms of welfareist approach, that is Antyodaya approach. At the same time, there is a need for promoting market competition because market has the ability to generate a lot of prosperity that we have witnessed in the past as well. For example, the American economy, which is prosperous. So all these approaches are to be clubbed together to move forward rather than adopting one particular approach. This completes the article. Now let us look into the next one. ISRO's Aditya mission has a payload called PAPA, that is Plasma Analyzer Package for Aditya. This has recently detected electrons and ions which have been ejected from the sun's corona, that is coronal mass ejection. In this article, we are going to deal about the recent observations made by this payload of Aditya mission, whose intent is to study the corona of sun, that is the outermost sphere of the sun. Now let us look into the relevance of the topic. The topics that we are going to learn under this, firstly, the topic belongs to space technology. This is ISRO's one of the important prestigious mission. We need to understand the details and nuances of the payloads and different instruments within these payloads that enables us to make observations on whatever the planetary object or whatever the solar object that we are trying to understand. From the syllabus point of view, current events of national and international importance. We have previous year examinations that have been asked. For example, what is Greece Lightning 10 recently in the news? Similarly, we could expect questions on the Aditya mission at the same time, different entities or elements within this Aditya mission. Coming to the context is the detection of the coronal mass ejections, wherein we have studied the electrons and ions. These are atomic particles, as you know. There is no need for us to go into the details of what these are, but detection of these particles enables us to understand the composition of sun, the corona sphere, what it is made of, and the energy or the other properties to assess the sun. Of course, we have issues with the understanding these elements or entities of the sun enables us to know how the sun's rays are and how it will impact our life back on Earth. At the same time, how to understand the suns of others, that is the stars that lie in our galaxy and the other galaxies. So, understanding it is important. Coming to the plasma analyzer package for Aditya. This is designed by Space Physics Laboratory and Avionics Entity. And this is a part of Aditya mission, as we have already seen, which has been operational since December 12, 2023. What this PAPA intends to do is, it intends to study the solar winds. Within it, we are going to learn about the electrons and ions, the properties of them. Thus, enables us to understand the properties of the sun in particular. PAPA has two instruments. These instruments study the electrons and ions, as we already discussed. These are Solar Wind Electron Energy Probe, that is SWEEP, and the other is SWEECAR, which is Solar Wind Ion Composition Analyzer. As the name itself suggests, they study the electrons and ions. And this has particular range of measurement. For example, the energy of the electrons that is to be observed through the instrument SWEEP enables us to understand or to make measurements. The range of energy that the SWEEP could calculate or measure with regards to the electrons is 10 electron volts to 3000 electron volts. Whereas SWEECAR, which studies the ions, it has a range between 10 electron volts to 25,000 electron volts. And through this, we will be able to arrive at the conclusion with regards to the measurements taken out of the sun's corona sphere. In this, what is of particular interest is the halo orbit. We have points called Lagrange points, that is L1, L2, L3, etc. We have these orbits which enables us to place ourselves to understand the sun. In these orbits, that is L1, L2, L3, Lagrange orbits, the gravitational pull between the sun and Earth balance out each other, and thus we'll be able to place the satellite or place any particular mission like Aditya L1 mission, which intends to study the solar sphere, that is outermost sphere of the sun. Here we have balancing of gravity, and thus we'll be able to place itself in the gravity rather than being influenced by either the gravity of the earth or the gravity of the sun, thus leading to the distability or instability. But this L1, L2, L3 Lagrange points are not stable, and they move around with regards to the sun or the earth. As you know, earth revolves around the sun. So similarly, L1, L2, L3 points revolves. This happens depending upon the orbit followed by the earth, the revolutionary orbit. And as these particular points are not stable, how we place this mission is, if this is Lagrange points and as it is not stable, we cannot exactly place our mission on that particular point. What we try to do is we try to orbit around these Lagrange points, and thus we'll be able to understand the sun through the orbit that is made by this mission. So this is the halo orbit insertion, how our Aditya mission ultimately is placed in the halo orbit, which is around the Lagrange point L1. Our particular mission is placed in the Lagrange point L1. This is also a factual question that you need to understand. And what this mission ultimately did is, it counted the electrons as well as the ions which have been released by the sun. And what we have observed is, as we go nearer to the sun, that is towards the sun, we measured higher ions and higher electrons. And as we go farther from the sun, we measure lesser ions and lesser electrons. This is significant. Why? Because we have equipped ourselves to understand sun sphere. So this has significance. We have already seen about the halo orbit, that is the Lagrange point L1, L2, L3. Now coming to the objectives of Aditya L1. The objective is to understand the sun's outermost sphere, as we already seen. In addition to it, we will be able to understand about or learn about sun's corona, sun's photosphere, chromosphere, solar emissions, solar winds and flares, coronal mass ejections. This is what the objective of Aditya L1 is ultimately. So this is about the Aditya L1 mission. At the same time, the Papa payload, which enables us to understand the sun's coronal mass ejection and measurements of the electrons as well as ions. Now let us look into another article. This article is about the recent changes which regulates the surrogacy practice in India. In this, the changes are going to be discussed. At the same time, what this new law means to the divorced individuals as well. The topics that we are going to discuss here are as follows. Firstly, the relevance. We are going to learn about surrogacy, what surrogacy is. Then, gametes transfer technology. That is how the gametes of individuals who are spouses, that is they are the partners, and how they together could use the technology to give birth to a child despite having the medical issues in terms of delivering a baby. We are also going to learn about district medical board, which has its role in certifying whether the parents could be allowed to use surrogacy as a way to give birth to a child or not. The relevance with regards to the topics that we are going to see: GS Paper 1, Social Empowerment; GS Paper 2, Government Policies and Interventions for Development in Various Sectors and Issues Arising Out of Their Design and Implementation. We have previous year questions asked with regards to the technology usage for upholding the issues faced by the society. Technology is an enabler which allows the people who are especially downtrodden to find solutions. And thus, if there are any vulnerabilities, technologies could be used as an assistance. We have seen again and again in the previous year questions asked in the UPSC how technology could be utilized for upholding the issues faced by the vulnerable. What are the research and developmental achievements in applied biotechnology? How will these achievements help to uplift poorer sections of the society? This has been asked in the year 2021 in UPSC examination. Now let us look into the topic. The context is the changes made by the union the Union government, that is the government of India, which regulates the surrogacy. The law which regulates the surrogacy has been changed. Surrogacy Regulation Rules 2022 were recently notified. As you know, we have delegated legislative power where central government, or for that matter even the state government, could notify certain rules as per the laws passed by the parliament or the state legislature, under which periodically, as per the requirements, central and state governments are given a power to notify rules. Under such power, using such power, central government has recently initiated this notification, and it notified the Surrogacy Regulation Rules 2022. And thus, this enables the usage of the donor gametes. The gametes here refer to either the sperm or the egg. As you know, these two are ultimately fertilized, and thus this is inserted into a surrogate mother. Thus, even though the couples wanted to give birth and they have faced certain or they are facing certain medical conditions and are not able to give birth to a child, they could seek the assistance from the surrogate mother. But earlier the rule was that both should donate their sperm and egg. That is, the male partner should use the sperm, the female partner her egg, then surrogacy is promoted, or they are given a go-ahead with regards to conceiving child through the process of surrogacy. But now, even the donor gametes are allowed in case of any medical issues faced by the parents or intending parents who want to give birth to a child. This is the recent changes that have been made with regards to the regulation of surrogacy. As you know, India only permits altruistic surrogacy. That is, it doesn't involve any kind of financial transaction. Earlier, we have commercial surrogacy, where through the use of financial means one could rent the womb. That is, they give money to a particular mother to carry out the process of surrogacy. But this is now not permitted as per the recent laws passed by the parliament. Thus, only a close relative who are connected through bloodline and there shouldn't be any kind of transactions involved, that is financial transaction, only then surrogacy could be practiced. Coming to the amendments to surrogacy rules, we have already seen what this amendment is clearly. The background is Supreme Court has been recently hearing a petition with regards to the medical issues faced by the woman who is facing a rare congenital disorder and thus her eggs cannot be utilized for fertilization. And for that purpose, it has allowed the donor gamete. So now even the gametes could be sought from the donor in case of any medical issues faced by the intending parents. And thus, we could do the fertilization despite having this lacunae. Thus, on that account, government has revised the rules after the Supreme Court's permission. This amendment thus now allows even the divorced individuals to seek the donor's gametes and give birth to a child. So, this is about the requirement of the gametes. Both gametes could be sought from the donor in case of any medical issues. And this is true even to the single woman, either widowed or divorced. Now, let us look at the regulation. There is a requirement for us to undertake supervision of this process. This is done by the District Medical Board. District Medical Board involves in certifying whether the intending couple are really facing medical issues or not. On that basis, this surrogacy could be initiated. So, this is about the recent changes made by the Government of India. This completes the article. Now, let us look into another article. This article is on NB8 as well as these NB8 countries attending India's premier conference, that is Regional Dialogue. The topics that we are going to discuss are as follows: the Nordic-Baltic cooperation as well as the Regional Dialogue. With regards to syllabus, events of international importance, mains GS paper 2, effects of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests. Obviously, these conference dialogues that are initiated by different countries around the world, as well as India's own initiative of Regional Dialogue, The dialogue in itself involves having conversations with different regions, different groupings. N8 region is one of the important regions given their high socio-economic developmental levels as well as their control over the Arctic region. Now let us look into the previous year questions asked on the similar topic. How will I2U2, that is India, Israel, UAE, USA, grouping transform India's position in global politics? This is one of the questions that have been asked in the previous year examination. Coming to the context, representatives of the Nordic-Baltic cooperation attended India's Raisinia dialogue in New Delhi. This is what we have already seen in the introductory slide. Now, what is this Nordic region? What is this Baltic region? Nordic countries are 5 in number. Together, Nordic and Baltic regions are 8. The Nordic countries are Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, whereas Baltic countries are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The important water bodies, certain times we have questions in the preliminary examination asked on the important water bodies that are situated in different regions. The important water bodies here are Gulf of Bothnia, Gulf of Finland, Gulf of Riga, Danish Strait, Skagerrak Strait, and Kattegat Strait. So, what is this NB8 cooperation with India? NB8 is an informal regional cooperation. That is, it is not formalized, having a proper structure in terms of organization, bureaucracy, etc. that we generally find with regards to various groupings. For example, SAARC, we have a charter, we have an executive, etc. It is made of 5 Nordic countries and 3 Baltic nations, as we already seen with regards to the regions, countries which are considered Nordic as well as Baltic. India included this Nordic belt region within its extended neighborhood program. Under this, India intends to improve its relations with various countries. So, it is one of the important strategies which is trying to improve the international relations of India. Thus, it is important from international relations perspective. The areas of interest and cooperation are as follows: green transition, maritime, health, intellectual property rights, space cooperation, artificial intelligence, student exchanges, culture, and tourism. Now let us look into what Raisinia dialogue is. Raisinia dialogue, as the name itself suggests, is a conference which is attended by various experts, various countries, sending their dignitaries, sending their diplomats, etc., trying to have a dialogue with regards to various happenings in the global world. At the same time, various important interests. It might be security, it might be economical, etc. Many times, countries have a convergent interest and they try to work on it to improve their present statuses. Especially in the globalized world, this is an important medium through which we could improve our socio-economic levels through these partners. At the same time, we could work on the security of the country as well. This is India's premier multi-stakeholder cross-sectoral conference. That is, we try to have a comprehensive conference by engaging individuals or entities from different sectors. This is hosted by Observer Research Foundation. It is important for preliminary examination in partnership with the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, what are the thematic pillars on which the Raisinia dialogue is generally conducted? Tech frontier, peace with the planet, war and peace, decolonizing multilateralism, post-2030 agenda, and defending democracy. These are the themes on which it is working. This completes the articles. Now let us look into the prelims practice questions as well as mains question. Coming to the first prelims question, consider the following statement. Nordic Baltic 8 is a regional cooperation that includes Poland, Estonia. Here itself you could stop. Why? Because Poland is not a part of Nordic Baltic 8 as we have already seen. So this is incorrect. It was formally established as a part of the European Union's regional policy. This is also false. As you have seen, it is informal. And that too, it is not a part of European Union's regional policy. Which of the above statement is or are correct? The answer is D, none of the above. Consider the following statements regarding surrogacy in India. The Surrogacy Regulation Act 2021 prohibits commercial surrogacy. This is true. Both gametes needed to come from the married couples undergoing surrogacy. This is false, as we have seen the recent changes brought in by the government through the notification. Which of the above statement is or are correct? The answer is A, one only. Now, during which phase were significant observations made by the Papa payload? This is a part of Aditya L1, as we have already seen. This is one of the payload which measures the electrons as well as the ions, showcasing a change in electron counts and reduction in electron energy spectra. It is a halo orbit insertion phase, as we have already seen. Regarding what is halo orbit? The answer is B. Next, consider the following statements regarding halo orbits and Lagrange points. Halo orbit refers to an orbit around Lagrangian point in a three-body system. This is true. Lagrange points are positions in space where the gravitational forces of two large bodies result in an unstable equilibrium. This is false. Actually, there is a stability on account of balancing of the gravitational forces, as you already see. Which of the above statement is or are correct? The answer is A, one only. Next, consider the following statements on Article 142. It grants the Supreme Court the authority to issue any decree or make any order required to ensure complete justice in any case or matter under its consideration. This is true. The provisions or directives issued under this article are binding only on the executive. As we have seen, it is not only binding on the executive, it is also binding on legislature. The provisions can be enforced throughout the territory of India. This too is true. Which of the following options are correct? The answer is C, 1 and 3 only. Now coming to the mains question. India's growth rate for the last 2 decades since 2003-4 financial year has been at 7.2%. In the context of this statement, discuss the nature of changes in the growth paradigm in India. I have already seen an article on this topic. In the introduction, write down the liberalization that ultimately led to 7.2%, close to 7.2% since past 2 decades, that is 20 years. And mention the reasons for it. You could elaborate on the reasons why we are able to attain such high levels of growth rates, liberalization, and the measures taken by various governments. And then mention how this didn't help India's cause completely. Of course, it's not without any success. We have seen tremendous success in terms of building up our economy, but it is not inclusive enough to cater to the needs of every section of the society. For that purpose, you have to explain why it has failed. That is, trickle-down effect has not been seen. It has been exclusive. The inequality is quite high. If you look at the Gini coefficient, you look at the malnutrition levels, the below poverty line, the health costs, the out-of-pocket expenditure in terms of health, the educational attainment levels, etc. It is not as per the extent of economic growth rate that we have witnessed. That is why there is a need for balancing growth rate, that is economic growth versus development, as we already seen in the article. Thus, there is a need for Indic model of development. We already seen the Indic model of development. Why Indic model of development is unique and as per the requirements of India. We've seen the Antyodaya approach. At the same time, the pragmatic approach. I've seen the 3 models, the pragmatic, Antyodaya, that is Bharatiya approach, and then we have seen the market model that we have adopted from the West. Balancing all the 3 ultimately leads us to the success. We already brought various indicators to calculate the developmental levels. Like for example, multidimensional poverty. And thus conclude by giving the examples of the strategies adopted by India to promote welfareism, at the same time balancing it with the market approach. This completes the daily analysis. Please do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you.